Hello, Girals. What if the exhaustion you feel at the end of the day isn't a reflection of how hard you're working, but of how much of yourself you've been giving to people who were never meant to hold it? Think about it for a moment. How many hours, how many late nights, how many mental loops have you gone through trying to fix someone else's life, only to find that they aren't even willing to meet you halfway? This isn't a judgment of character. It's a truth about energy. Every human has a finite amount, and when you invest it in the wrong people, the cost isn't just time, it's your confidence, your sense of self, and sometimes even your joy. And the reason this matters is simple. Until we learn to recognize who is worth our emotional currency and who isn't, we remain trapped in cycles that slowly chip away at our own resilience. We are often drawn to the wrong people because they reflect something familiar, something we think we can save, or perhaps something that unconsciously reminds us of patterns from our past. That pull can feel magnetic. There's an illusion of connection, of intimacy, even when the reality is that these relationships are asymmetrical. You give, they take. You stretch, they shrink. You invest, they withhold. And somewhere along the line, your mind begins to normalize the imbalance, convincing you that this level of strain is acceptable. It isn't. No human was meant to be drained consistently by another. No one should feel that showing up authentically requires permission or compromise of their own well-being. One of the hardest truths about the wrong people is that they often come wrapped in the guise of love, friendship, or mentorship. They might make you feel seen in fleeting moments or offer just enough validation to keep you hoping. But when the curtain falls and the everyday patterns emerge, the imbalance becomes impossible to ignore. You start to notice how your joy diminishes after interactions. You feel a knot in your stomach anticipating calls or messages. You begin to measure yourself against their moods, and suddenly your own needs feel secondary. This is not love, it is a slow erosion of your inner life. And yet, leaving or stepping back from these relationships can feel impossible. There's fear of confrontation, fear of being perceived as selfish, fear of what if I'm wrong. But here's the paradox. The moment you stop letting fear dictate your attachments, you start reclaiming your life. The people who are meant to be in your life will not drain you. They will amplify your strengths, honor your boundaries, and match your investment with equal care. Letting go of the wrong people is not abandonment. It is an act of clarity and courage. It signals that you understand the value of your own energy, that you know your worth, and that you refuse to let others' inability to reciprocate define your self-esteem. Your body often knows the truth long before your mind catches up. Pay attention to the subtle signals, the tightness in your chest, the exhaustion that doesn't seem related to physical work, the endless mental loops replaying moments of disrespect or neglect. These are not coincidences, they are alerts. Ignoring them is easy, but it comes at a cost that compounds over time. Listening to them is radical self-care, a declaration that you will not be diminished by the expectations or patterns of others. Choosing to stop investing in the wrong people is not an act of anger or revenge, it is an act of self-respect. It is saying, I am worthy of relationships that do not require me to shrink to fit. And when you finally reclaim that energy, you create space for connections that are reciprocal, nourishing, and transformative. You give yourself permission to thrive in ways that were impossible when your life was crowded with people who drained instead of uplifted. In doing so, you discover that protecting your energy isn't selfish, it's essential. It is the first step toward freedom, authenticity, and the kind of life that feels full, intentional, and deeply aligned with who you truly are. Many of us grow up believing that loyalty is always noble, that standing by someone no matter what is a sign of character. From parents, teachers, or even media, we internalize the idea that abandoning someone, even when they hurt us, is a moral failing. But here's the truth that we rarely talk about. Loyalty without boundaries is not noble, it's self-abandonment. When you continually invest in people who disregard your feelings, who exploit your kindness, or who refuse to meet you halfway, the cost isn't just temporary discomfort. The cost is your self-worth, chipped away piece by piece until you barely recognize the person in the mirror. Every time you prioritize their needs over your own, you are sending a silent message to yourself that your energy, your time, and your heart are negotiable commodities available for anyone willing to take them. We justify this behavior with stories we tell ourselves. They're going through a hard time, or they'll change, or I can help them if I just try harder. These narratives sound compassionate, but they often mask something less noble: fear. Fear of losing the relationship, fear of confrontation, or fear of being seen as selfish. The reality is that staying loyal to someone who consistently undervalues you doesn't make you virtuous. It makes you invisible in your own life. Every hour you spend trying to meet their unspoken expectations is an hour you aren't investing in yourself. Every compromise you make to avoid conflict is a tiny surrender of your dignity. And over time, These accumulations create a quiet exhaustion, a sense that you are always giving but rarely receiving. The wrong people teach us painful lessons about the limits of our generosity. They highlight how energy, love, and attention are finite resources. Even the most patient, empathetic, and giving individuals cannot endlessly supply others without expecting reciprocity. When you ignore that truth, you start to internalize a subtle but devastating lie that your worth is dependent on how much you can tolerate or fix someone else. And this lie doesn't just harm your external life, it infiltrates your inner life. It fosters anxiety, self-doubt, and a pervasive sense of inadequacy. You begin to question whether you are too sensitive, too demanding, or too selfish, when in reality, you are simply human. Boundaries in this context become a revolutionary act. Saying no, stepping back, or even walking away is not a failure of loyalty. It is an assertion of your right to exist fully and freely. It is acknowledging that your time, emotional energy, and heart are valuable, and they deserve to be honored. Recognizing this doesn't happen overnight. It often begins with small, almost imperceptible shifts, noticing when someone's behavior consistently drains you, realizing that certain patterns never improve, or accepting that hope without evidence is a dangerous gamble on your own happiness. When you start to prioritize your well-being, the impact is profound. You begin to see who truly values you, who shows up consistently, and who contributes to your growth rather than diminishes it. The relationships that remain become richer, more balanced, and deeply fulfilling. You learn to distinguish between those who are worthy of your investment and those who are not. And with that clarity comes freedom, a freedom rooted not in resentment, but in self-respect, wisdom, and the courage to place your life and energy in the hands of people who honor them. Investing wisely isn't about withdrawing from the world or becoming cynical. It's about learning the difference between giving with generosity and giving with surrender. It's about understanding that loyalty, when untethered from boundaries, can be a silent thief of joy, purpose, and self-respect. And the moment you embrace that truth, you unlock a power that is quietly transformative, the ability to live with intention, love without fear, and protect yourself while still remaining open to meaningful connection. We don't stay with the wrong people because we're foolish. We stay because we're hopeful. We stay because our hearts are wired to believe in potential, to see glimpses of who someone could be rather than who they consistently are. There's a powerful magnetism in that hope, a voice inside saying, if I just try harder, if I just love more, if I just wait long enough, this will change. And at first can feel like faith, like loyalty, even like courage. But hope without evidence, when applied to someone who repeatedly shows you disrespect, disregard, or inconsistency, slowly becomes a kind of self-betrayal. The longer we stay, the more our own sense of worth gets tied up in a narrative that isn't aligned with reality, and that is exhausting in ways that are almost invisible at first. Think about the patterns we ignore or rationalize. Maybe they cancel plans without explanation. Maybe they speak harshly, then apologize, only to repeat the same behavior. Maybe they require constant reassurance, but give very little in return. We excuse these patterns because we are in love with potential, because we are in love with the version of them that exists only in our imagination. But human beings are revealed in patterns, not promises. It's easy to forget that in the moment, to let our hopes blind us to the slow erosion of our own boundaries and emotional energy. When we stay too long, we are not helping them become better. We are normalizing the treatment that would have felt unacceptable from anyone else. The psychology behind staying is often subtle. There's fear of loss, of confrontation, of being judged. There's a hope that our efforts are what make the relationship meaningful, that if we leave, it will somehow feel like a failure of character. But here's the truth, walking away from someone who consistently devalues you is not failure. It is clarity. It is an act of courage. It is the acknowledgement that your emotional energy is a resource that deserves care and protection, and that your self-worth cannot be outsourced to someone else's behavior. The moment we recognize that staying in these dynamics does not serve us is the moment we begin to reclaim our power. Another reason we stay too long is familiarity. We confuse discomfort with love, neglect with normalcy. We adapt, we excuse, we rationalize, and in doing so, we create an entire narrative around why leaving isn't possible. We tell ourselves that endurance equals commitment, that suffering quietly is virtuous, when in reality it is a slow theft of our vitality. Staying too long becomes a habit, and breaking that habit can feel like stepping off a cliff. But the risk of staying is far greater. The risk is losing sight of who you are and what you deserve while investing in someone who cannot meet you where you are. The courage to leave or set boundaries requires introspection and self-trust. It asks you to pay attention to your own feelings, your own exhaustion, and your own unmet needs. It asks you to notice the difference between hope and evidence, between who someone could be and who they consistently are. And it asks you to accept that love, real love, does not demand self-abandonment. It respects boundaries, nurtures growth, and matches your investment with reciprocity. When we finally allow ourselves to let go of hope that is unearned, we open space for relationships that are genuine, mutual, and life-affirming. Staying too long is often disguised as patience, kindness, or loyalty, but it is rarely any of those things when it comes at the cost of your own well-being. Recognizing that is the first step toward liberation. The moment you stop trying to force someone into a role they cannot fulfill, you begin to reclaim your own energy, your own time, and your own life. And in that reclamation lies the most profound form of self-respect, the courage to honor yourself above the patterns of others, and to invest only where it is truly reciprocated, valued, and meaningful. Long before your mind can rationalize a situation, your body already knows the truth. There's a subtle tension in your chest when you see their name pop up on your phone. There's a heaviness in your stomach after a conversation that left you second-guessing yourself. There's a quiet exhaustion that creeps in, not from physical exertion, but from the constant emotional labor of navigating someone else's inconsistency, manipulation, or disregard. Our bodies are incredibly intelligent. They register patterns of harm, neglect, and imbalance long before our conscious thoughts catch up. Ignoring these signals is easy at first because we tell ourselves we're overreacting, that we're being too sensitive, or that we just need to try harder. But each time we dismiss the messages our body is sending, we reinforce a cycle of self-betrayal that becomes progressively harder to break. We've been conditioned to prioritize rational explanations over visceral truth. We look for reasons why someone's behavior makes sense, or try to convince ourselves that our discomfort is the problem rather than the warning. But those physical sensations, tight shoulders, restless energy, rapid heartbeat, or a knot in the stomach are not inconveniences to be ignored. They are signals of misalignment, indicators that your boundaries are being crossed, and proof that the relationship may not be safe for your emotional health. Trusting your body requires slowing down, noticing, and giving yourself permission to feel what you feel without judgment. It's the beginning of self-awareness and, ultimately, self-preservation. The body's wisdom often manifests as a combination of subtle signs and repeated patterns. You might notice that after interacting with certain people, you feel drained rather than energized, anxious rather than secure, or tense rather than relaxed. These aren't coincidences. They are feedback loops, evidence of a dynamic that depletes you rather than sustains you. When we listen closely, we start to recognize that these physical cues are aligned with a deeper truth. Some people are not meant to hold space in our lives in a way that nourishes our well-being. The earlier we recognize these patterns, the sooner we can make choices that protect our energy and honor our own needs. Learning to trust these bodily signals takes courage, because it often requires acknowledging uncomfortable truths. It may mean admitting that someone you care about, someone you've invested in emotionally, is not aligned with your values or capable of treating you with what you deserve. It may mean making the difficult decision to distance yourself, set boundaries, or walk away entirely. And yet, the discomfort of that decision is infinitely less harmful than the slow erosion of self-respect and vitality that occurs when we ignore the wisdom our bodies are providing. When we honor the messages our bodies send, we cultivate an embodied sense of self-respect. We begin to recognize that our energy, time, and attention are finite and precious resources. We stop making excuses for the behavior of others and instead make intentional choices about where and with whom we invest. This doesn't mean we become cynical or avoid connection. It means we approach relationships with discernment, awareness, and courage. It means valuing our own experience as much as we value the comfort of others. Ultimately, listening to your body is an act of radical self-care. It signals that you are willing to confront difficult truths, prioritize your well-being, and invest in relationships that are reciprocal and life-giving. The moment you begin to honor the intelligence of your own body, you take the first step toward reclaiming your energy, your joy, and your sense of self. You begin to live in alignment with your own truth, rather than bending to the patterns of others, who drain rather than sustain you. Your body knows first, and when you finally learn to listen, your life begins to shift in profound and liberating ways. Caring for others is one of the most beautiful capacities we have, but there is a subtle and dangerous line between compassion and self-sacrifice, and many of us cross it without realizing. Compassion invites presence, empathy, and understanding. It allows you to witness someone else's struggle without losing yourself in it. Self-sacrifice, on the other hand, demands that you give beyond your limits, ignore your own needs, and prioritize someone else's comfort over your own well-being. The difference is not always obvious at first, because both can feel noble, kind, or morally right, but the consequences are radically different. Compassion strengthens relationships, nurtures trust, and sustains both parties, while self-sacrifice slowly erodes your boundaries, your confidence, and eventually your sense of self. Many people confuse the two because we have been socialized to believe that putting others first is inherently virtuous. From a young age, we are told that kindness requires endurance, patience requires tolerance of mistreatment, and love requires constant giving. While these values are meaningful, they become dangerous when they are applied indiscriminately, without boundaries, and without regard for our own emotional and physical limits. When you consistently give more than you receive, when you stretch yourself to meet the expectations of people who do not reciprocate, your compassion transforms into an invisible debt, a form of quiet self-erosion that leaves you depleted, resentful, and uncertain of your own worth. Understanding the difference between healthy compassion and self-sacrifice requires deep self-awareness. Compassion allows you to help others while remaining whole. Self-sacrifice asks you to diminish yourself. Compassion feels energizing even when it requires effort. It aligns with your values and affirms your humanity. Self-sacrifice, however, leaves you emotionally drained, anxious, and disconnected from your own needs. If after interacting with someone you feel exhausted, resentful, or diminished, it's likely that what you've been practicing is self-sacrifice disguised as compassion. Recognizing this truth is the first step in reclaiming your energy and learning to invest in ways that are life-giving rather than depleting. Part of this discernment is understanding the patterns in our relationships. Are you constantly making compromises to keep someone else comfortable, even when it costs you dearly? Are your emotional, mental, or physical boundaries routinely violated, and do you excuse it in the name of love or care? Are you giving far more than you are receiving? These questions are not meant to make you feel guilty, but to illuminate where you may be unknowingly surrendering your own well-being in the service of someone else's temporary comfort. Healthy relationships do not demand self-abandonment. They operate in reciprocity, respect, and mutual support. Practicing compassion without self-sacrifice requires courage. It asks you to say no when necessary, to enforce boundaries even when it is uncomfortable, and to walk away when the other person refuses to honor your limits. It requires rejecting the societal myth that love is measured by how much you suffer for someone else, and instead embracing the truth that love is measured by mutual care, respect, and the ability to nurture each other without eroding either person's sense of self. By drawing this line, you preserve your energy, your dignity, and your emotional resilience while still being capable of authentic care and empathy. Ultimately, choosing compassion over self-sacrifice is a radical act of self-respect. It demonstrates that you can be kind, generous, and loving without becoming diminished in the process. It is the recognition that your value is not determined by how much you can endure for someone else, but by your ability to engage authentically, honor your own needs, and maintain healthy boundaries. When you master this balance, your relationships transform. You become a magnet for people who respect your limits, who value your energy, and who can receive your care without taking advantage of it. In this way, compassion becomes not a burden, but a source of strength, empowerment, and life-affirming connection that nourishes both you and those around you. Red flags are rarely dramatic or explosive. They are often quiet, subtle, and easy to dismiss, which is why so many of us ignore them until it's too late. Inconsistent effort, for example, is one of the most common patterns we excuse. Someone may show up when it's convenient, respond when they feel like it, or make promises they have no intention of keeping. At first, we rationalize it: they're busy, they didn't mean it, or they'll do better next time. But when these moments become repeated patterns, they are no longer anomalies. They are signals. Consistent inconsistency tells you something profound: this person cannot be relied upon in the ways that truly matter. Excusing it over and over erodes your trust, both in them and eventually in your own judgment. Disrespect disguised as humor is another red flag that many people overlook. A cutting joke, a subtle put down, or a dismissive comment framed as just teasing might feel harmless in the moment. But when it occurs repeatedly, it chips away at your self-esteem, your sense of safety, and your emotional well-being. People who truly value you don't belittle you, even in jest. Normalizing such behavior is often a way we protect ourselves from confrontation or the discomfort of setting boundaries, but in doing so, we allow patterns of harm to solidify. The body remembers every microaggression, every insult, and every moment you tolerated something that felt wrong. Excusing it doesn't make it harmless, it makes it habitual. Feeling drained after every interaction is perhaps the most honest signal of a red flag. A relationship should energize, challenge, and inspire you, not leave you exhausted, anxious, or perpetually on edge. If someone's presence regularly depletes your energy, it's not a reflection of your weakness. It's a reflection of misalignment. Your emotional energy is a finite resource, and continuing to invest it where it is not valued is a slow theft of vitality. We often rationalize this by convincing ourselves that relationships require sacrifice or that emotional labor is inherently noble. But sacrificing your well-being for the sake of someone else's convenience is not noble. It's self-betrayal. We also tend to overlook repeated boundary violations. This is one of the clearest signs of someone who is not right for us. When a person consistently disregards your limits, ignores your requests, or pressures you to compromise your values, They are sending a message about what they consider acceptable treatment. Ignoring these messages does not improve the relationship, it only strengthens the pattern of disregard. Recognizing and enforcing boundaries is not a punishment or an ultimatum. It is an act of self-respect. It teaches both you and the other person what is necessary for a healthy interaction. And when those boundaries are ignored, it's a clear signal that this relationship may not be safe for your emotional health. Excusing red flags often comes from hope, fear, or familiarity. Hope that things will change, fear of being alone, or the comfort of patterns we recognize. Even if they harm us, keeps us tethered to people who drain us. We tell ourselves that patience, love, or loyalty should override the evidence in front of us. But patterns rarely fix themselves. Disrespect, neglect, inconsistency, and disregard are rarely temporary inconveniences. They are often deeply ingrained behaviors that reveal someone's capacity to meet your needs. Recognizing these patterns requires vigilance, honesty, and courage. It requires paying attention to the signals, both emotional and physical, that your body and mind provide. And it requires the willingness to act on what you notice, even if it's uncomfortable or disappointing. The earlier you notice and respond to red flags, the more you protect your emotional energy, your self-worth, and your capacity for genuine, reciprocal relationships. In the end, red flags are not punishments or tests. They are truths presented to you in the form of patterns and behaviors. Excusing them repeatedly is a choice, but it is one that comes at a significant cost. Learning to see them clearly, trust your instincts, and take decisive action is an essential step toward reclaiming your energy, protecting your boundaries, and creating space for the relationships that are truly deserving of your time, attention, and care. Choosing yourself often comes with a cost, and that cost is the discomfort of disappointing others. Many of us have been taught that making someone else unhappy is inherently wrong, that our worth is tied to how much we can please, and that keeping the peace is more important than honoring our own needs. But here's the truth: the moment you start protecting your energy, setting boundaries, and refusing to tolerate disrespect, you will inevitably disappoint people who have grown accustomed to your overgiving. That discomfort does not mean you are failing. It means you are claiming your life, your power, and your self-respect. The courage to disappoint others is one of the most profound acts of integrity you can perform. The people who benefit from your silence, your tolerance, or your overextension often resist your boundaries. They may try guilt, manipulation, or even anger to convince you that their comfort is more important than your well-being. And it's tempting in those moments to back down, to explain, justify, or apologize simply for prioritizing yourself. But every time you yield, you reinforce the idea that your needs are negotiable, that your energy is expendable, and that your voice is optional. Learning to accept that disappointment is inevitable when you choose yourself is part of the process of liberation. It is a recognition that your emotional health cannot be outsourced to the convenience of others. Disappointing others is not about cruelty or selfishness. It is about honesty. It is about acknowledging that you are responsible for your own life, your own boundaries, and your own emotional safety. People who truly care about you will feel the disappointment, yes, but they will also respect your courage, your clarity, and your refusal to compromise your dignity. On the other hand, those who are upset or resistant may be revealing their own dependence on your overgiving or their inability to respect boundaries. In both cases, the act of standing firm teaches a fundamental lesson. Your presence is not a tool to meet others' needs at the expense of your own. The courage to disappoint requires self-trust. It requires believing that your instincts, your feelings, and your limits are valid. It asks you to tolerate temporary discomfort for long-term clarity, and it demands that you redefine what disappointment actually means. Disappointing someone who has grown used to your overextension is not betrayal, it is alignment. It is the difference between living reactively, always adjusting to keep others comfortable, and living proactively, making intentional choices that honor your heart and your energy. This kind of courage also shifts the dynamics of relationships. When you consistently honor yourself, you set a precedent for how you expect to be treated. Boundaries become visible, expectations become clear, and interactions shift from a pattern of depletion to one of reciprocity. Some relationships will strengthen as a result, grounded in mutual respect and understanding. Others will dissolve not because you were unkind, but because they were unsustainable in the first place. And that is a necessary, even liberating, part of growth. Ultimately, learning to disappoint others is about redefining responsibility. You are responsible for your life, your boundaries, and your well-being, not for managing the feelings, expectations, or discomfort of others. Choosing yourself may feel uncomfortable at first, but it is an investment in your future self, the self who is whole, resilient, and capable of meaningful, balanced relationships. It is a radical act of love for yourself, and a demonstration that your worth is not determined by others' convenience, approval, or comfort. In embracing this courage, you reclaim your life, your energy, and your right to exist fully and authentically. When you stop pouring your energy into the wrong people, something remarkable begins to happen. Space opens up in your life. Space for clarity, space for growth, space for relationships that are reciprocal, respectful, and truly life-giving. Many of us have been conditioned to believe that love, attention, or loyalty must be limitless, that we must constantly give regardless of the return. But energy, time, and emotional bandwidth are finite. Every moment you spend on someone who drains you is a moment you cannot invest in someone who uplifts you. Reinvesting your energy wisely is not selfish. It is an act of profound self-respect, a declaration that your heart, your mind, and your life are too valuable to be squandered on imbalance. This reinvestment begins with awareness. It requires observing where your energy has been going and honestly assessing the quality of the returns you are receiving. Ask yourself, after interactions with certain people, do I feel uplifted, supported, and inspired? Or do I feel drained, anxious, and diminished? The answer is often obvious if you are willing to notice. Many of us ignore these signals because of fear of missing out, fear of being alone, or fear of confrontation. But recognizing the truth is the first step toward reclaiming your energy. Once you see the patterns clearly, you can choose where to invest, and those choices are transformative. Investing in the right people is about reciprocity and alignment, not quantity. It is not about surrounding yourself with perfection or eliminating every challenge from your relationships. It is about creating connections where mutual care, respect, and energy exchange are present. The people who deserve your time will amplify your strengths, honor your boundaries, and support your growth. They will not demand that you diminish yourself to maintain their comfort, nor will they drain your spirit for their own convenience. These relationships allow you to thrive rather than merely survive, to show up fully rather than partially, and to be seen authentically without fear of judgment or exploitation. This process also requires courage and discernment. Reinvesting energy into the right people often means letting go of long-standing patterns, social obligations, or relationships that feel familiar but are toxic. It is not easy to walk away from the comfort of the known, even when the known is harmful. But choosing to direct your attention and care toward people who truly matter is a radical act of alignment. It reinforces the value of your own time and energy, and it creates a ripple effect. As you honor yourself, you invite others to honor you in return. Reinvesting energy is not purely about relationships either. It is about your overall life alignment. When you stop overextending for the wrong people, you create room for personal growth, creative pursuits, self-care, and experiences that nourish your mind, body, and spirit. Your energy becomes a deliberate force, no longer scattered or misused. You begin to recognize that every interaction, every connection, and every investment of time matters, and choosing wisely is a profound responsibility to yourself and to the people who genuinely deserve your presence. In the end, reinvesting your energy into the right people is both liberating and empowering. It shifts your life from a cycle of depletion and compromise to one of abundance and intentionality. It allows you to build a network of relationships that sustain rather than drain, that encourage rather than diminish, and that inspire rather than exhaust. By learning to discern, prioritize, and invest wisely, you not only protect your own energy, but also cultivate deeper, more meaningful connections. This is the essence of living intentionally, valuing your own presence and offering it only to those who honor it, creating a life rich with authentic connection, mutual respect, and emotional reciprocity. Walking away from the wrong people is often portrayed as dramatic or confrontational. But the truth is that some of the most powerful acts of self-respect are quiet, deliberate, and almost invisible to the outside world. The quiet power of self-respect lies in its subtlety. It doesn't require a public declaration, a dramatic confrontation, or a justification to anyone. It is a personal decision to honor your boundaries, protect your energy, and refuse to participate in dynamics that diminish your sense of self. This kind of self-respect is transformative because it signals to yourself and to others that your well-being is non-negotiable. It is not about proving a point or punishing anyone. It is about living in alignment with your values, priorities, and emotional truth. Many of us underestimate the impact of quietly choosing ourselves. We imagine that power must be loud, aggressive, or visible to matter. But there is immense strength in simply refusing to allow someone else's disregard to dictate your peace, your choices, or your emotional state. When you walk away or disengage from toxic patterns, you are asserting your right to exist fully without compromise. You are demonstrating that your presence, your energy, and your heart are valuable, and they will not be squandered on those unwilling or unable to meet you in mutual respect. This act, although quiet, radiates clarity and courage, and it sets the stage for deeper transformation in your life. Self-respect also allows you to reclaim your internal narrative. When you invest in the wrong people, you often internalize blame, doubt, and a sense of inadequacy. You question whether you are too sensitive, too demanding, or too difficult. Choosing yourself interrupts that cycle. By honoring your boundaries, you validate your own experience, Affirm your instincts and reinforce the belief that you deserve relationships that nurture, respect, and sustain you. This is not arrogance or selfishness. It is truth. It is the recognition that your life is your responsibility and that protecting your integrity is paramount. The quiet power of self-respect manifests in every decision you make after that recognition. You stop over-explaining your choices. You stop rationalizing why someone's behavior is acceptable when it isn't. You stop bending to accommodate patterns that are harmful or draining. Instead, you allow yourself the freedom to invest in what aligns with your values and priorities. This recalibration creates a ripple effect. You begin to attract people who respect your limits, honor your presence, and match your energy with reciprocity. Relationships transform from exhausting obligations into enriching partnerships, collaborations, and connections. Importantly, self-respect is not about anger, resentment, or cutting people out of your life impulsively. It is about clarity, intentionality, and courage. It is about recognizing that some connections, no matter how familiar or emotionally charged, are not sustainable if they come at the cost of your peace, dignity, or personal growth. By consistently choosing yourself in small and large ways, you build a foundation for a life where your energy is protected, your choices are intentional, and your sense of self is unwavering. Ultimately, the quiet power of self-respect transforms the way you live. It allows you to approach relationships, work, and life itself from a place of strength rather than depletion. It teaches you that your presence has value, that your energy is sacred, and that your boundaries are not negotiable. By consistently honoring yourself, you create a life that reflects your truth, fosters genuine connection, and cultivates deep resilience. And in this quiet, unwavering commitment to yourself, you discover freedom, confidence, and the profound peace that comes from knowing that you will never allow anyone else's inability to respect you to dictate the course of your life.